today we're going to be covering a video that I saw just was put online here by the Score eSports. This is titled "The Biggest Disaster in Esports History." Unsurprisingly, it is covering Overwatch League from its start to its ultimate demise. If you're watching this video and you're unfamiliar with me, I'm Tasteless. I've been in Korea for, I think, 16 years now. I started my professional gaming career in StarCraft 1 and then moved to Seoul in South Korea to cast StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. I've done a bunch of different titles in esports. So I've been in esports for more than half my life, from playing to casting to streaming and making YouTube content like this. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I'll be putting more content out like this in the future. So I thought this video was excellent. I highly recommend that you check this channel out if you don't know about it already. And my cat's jumping on my desk here. Let me move my cat out of the way. I'm going to start this. I'm going to give some commentary a little bit after they get through the opening here. And we're going to be taking some pauses and some moments to unpack a lot of the stuff they're talking about here, give my own perspective on it. I could not agree more with the title. This is probably the biggest disaster in esports history. Let's go ahead and take a look at what they had to say.
Overwatch was this very successful game, global, people loved it.
You know, nobody anticipated how meaningful and big the success of the game would be, obviously.
When it was announced that Blizzard was starting Overwatch League, obviously everyone was very excited.
I think it was initially pitched as like, NFL for esports.
Yeah, that's our vision for how we're going to celebrate and reward our players, is build a league that is like the NFL, only global.
Prophet with 3! He's killed 4 players now on his own! And the Spitfire are coming through with this one. Prophet finds 5 kills on this Tracer. Anybody believe that's enough?
Personally, I was a little bit worried because it sounded like a logistical nightmare.
There was conversations of people being like, they have to be having a hard time setting this up.
So I think over time, the league lost a lot of its personality. Like, it just started to feel very bland.
Well, you want your team to win, right? They're going to have to play what's better.
From the viewing perspective, it was certainly boring to see the same heroes in every map, in every match, right?
I was not able to speak publicly about OWL while I worked at Twitch, but you better believe that I was the guy in every meeting going, this is stupid and you're all stupid.
At a certain point, I'm like, what the hell do you people want?
Frat boy culture. That is how Activision Blizzard is now being described here in this new lawsuit.
The danger here is YouTube go, you know what? We don't want to be associated with you because T-Mobile don't want to be associated with you. Coke don't want to be associated with you.
We were doing more than fumble in the dark. We were running into walls. Like, it was just double shield. There was no hope.
In the midst of that, they were behind the scenes working on a not sequel, then sequel, everything changed kind of thing.
There is a community that wants a lot of Overwatch 1 back, and they think a lot of the magic was lost in 5. I think more and more people will start to realize maybe we did have it better.
There was no need for Overwatch 2. It was a cash grab marketing scam that made them abandon the first game for years.
It is kind of like a perfect storm of that would kill an esports league.
It's insane how many bad decisions Overwatch League made over the years.
Okay, so that's the summary. We're going to go into the video now. I could have paused that like 10 different times and talked about all these little things, but they go into more detail as we get further along in the video. But yeah, as Overwatch League was announced, there was nothing that came close in size or scope to anything that had been attempted before, I think, which is part of its demise. At the time, you had the original StarCraft, the original esports bubble, I should say, or explosion, I should say, in Korea. That was about 24 years ago, a year or two after StarCraft 1's release. That went on for about a decade. StarCraft 2 came out in the, 2010, 2012? It's been so long ago. And that caused the next big global esports explosion. And then there was a series of games. Everything started becoming an esport. And I think we hit the fever pitch of that with Overwatch and Overwatch League. Let's get on into the next part of this video.
It has been something like 17 years since Blizzard opened the door to a new adventure.
That is true. That was insane. We had only had remakes or sequels, I should say, of StarCraft, Diablo, Warcraft, and its many iterations from World of Warcraft to Hearthstone. everything like that. So this was a huge deal that they had finally taken on another type of IP.
And my friends, the wait ends right now.
I was at BlizzCon, like I was at every BlizzCon. I got to see this announcement happen. It was wild.
When Overwatch was released on May 24th, 2016, it was something new. A MOBA-style hero shooter that rolled many of gaming's favorite elements into one mind-blowing offering.
It felt like sort of return to the Saturday morning cartoon heroes of, like, you know, my childhood and all that. Like, ability shooters are common now, but at the time, that was still something that was relatively new. And I think it wasn't just me. I think the gaming community in general was very excited about it.
This is Doe, by the way. Friend of mine, worked in Korea for a long time. Casted StarCraft 2 at GSL in the early days, also did League of Legends right at the very beginning, kind of the inception of eSports in Korea. Then was over in Los Angeles working at Overwatch League. I think he's still in LA now.
There was a palpable sense of excitement, and before long, Overwatch blew up, both in terms of active player base and the hours they spent playing the game.
More than 7 million players have joined Overwatch's fight for the future.
Across all 3 platforms, 190 million hours of the game have been played since launch on May 24th.
It's so smooth, it's so fresh, it's so dynamic, it's so responsive. It's just absolutely ridiculous on every level. I mean, it is my favorite game. It goes without saying. This is my favorite game right now.
Overwatch was designed with esports in mind, and from the very beginning, some regional...
Just a little note here. Overwatch apparently was originally, I think they were thinking about making a shooting game MOBA. And they toyed around with it. Keep in mind that a lot of games at Blizzard at the time were in incubation, and they would kill them if they didn't think... sorry, shooting game MMO. Did I say MOBA? Thank you, chat. Sorry, shooting game MMO. My bad. Yeah, Project Name Titan. Anyways, Blizzard had a lot of games that were in incubation they would kill if they didn't think were ready or viable to the market. And so they had this game that was kind of sitting around, and they had this arena shooter aspect inside the game that they were thinking about using for that MMO, and decided to then extract that, work on that part of the game, and then turn that into a competitive mode, which is, of course, Overwatch, which we now know.
Competitions like Apex Korea showed us just what was possible in this new game. But all of them were eventually absorbed by Blizzard in preparation for the launch of the Overwatch League.
I kind of ran over a point they just made. There was a huge league in Korea. Overwatch in Korea was massive. If you went into PC cafes in Seoul or anywhere in South Korea, people were playing Overwatch. There's only been a couple games that people have been insane about in Korea. One, obviously, StarCraft. 2, League of Legends, which is still massive now. 3, PUBG, or PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, which is still got a pretty big presence out here. And probably the 4th one is Overwatch.
We designed Overwatch from the ground up to excel as a competitive game. We're looking for the top players in the world and the team owners who will form the Overwatch League. There will be regular schedules, professional contracts, free agency, baseline minimum salaries and benefits, providing more stability for teams and players.
So you got to remember, at the start of StarCraft 2, we had Blizzard, I think, finally in control of their own esports IP. StarCraft 1, Blizzard was kind of locked out by Kespa. And that's one of the reasons why StarCraft 1 kind of remained an insulated microcosm in the world of esports in a lot of ways. StarCraft 2 caused that big boom. And then with the next major titles they released, games like Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, they were building esports infrastructure around it. And Overwatch was really the biggest attempt to make global infrastructure early on. We're talking player contracts with guaranteed salaries at a certain bottom, I think 50K, without a ceiling, in an attempt to make this the most, I guess you could say, similar to a conventional sports model. And this was going on as League of Legends had been exploding. Keep in mind, everything that you're seeing here is juxtaposed with their competitor at Riot Games, with League of Legends, which is still, at the time, I think was still their only game. They might have had the Auto Battler. Why can I not think of the game? And a couple other smaller titles. But basically, Riot Games was League of Legends. And Blizzard was attempting to compete and catch up, and this was their, in many ways, their attempt to outdo that. TFT, thank you so much. Oh, TFT was still a ways away. Okay, I stand corrected. Sorry, sometimes this gets to be a bit of a blur in my mind going back. But anyways, remember that League of Legends had become a massive phenomena globally and had caught on in a way, not just with a player base, but also competitively and with an esports viewership that Blizzard was struggling to get with any of their titles. In size and scope.
It was announced that Blizzard was starting Overwatch League. Obviously, everyone was very excited. Everyone thought it was going to be a huge step forward for esports. It was definitely seen as this moment where esports was going to become legit, because that's obviously something esports has struggled with for a long time. And they had this talk of like, we're going to have 50K minimum salaries, and the players are going to have healthcare and pensions, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be this huge scale thing.
And for some perspective here, guys, most of esports in its history, and it's still frankly very true today, it's a little bit like Broadway or stories in Hollywood, where there are a couple people who are making it. This is true for streaming as well, by the way. A couple of people at the top who are doing very well. That includes, professional players, streamers, casters, tournament organizers that are killing it. And then a lot of people at the bottom who aren't doing well. So the fact that there was, and I don't know who that was who was interviewed earlier, but mentioned healthcare, mentioned a base salary, that was a big deal.
These guys are getting paid to do this. The league minimum is 50 grand a year?
Yes.
And how high does it go potentially?
So there currently isn't a salary cap. So the scale is as good as, and is, to me, demand of the players.
Now, so Overwatch League, is that like, Mike, is that like...
It's Megyn Kelly. She used to be on Fox. I forgot about this. She was actually on NBC for a while. I think she's on YouTube now.
NFL, like, is that today's version of the NFL, only an online game?
Megan, this is how they've dialed it up. I mean, they're now envisioning Boston playing against New York, or Boston playing against Houston, and Miami playing against Houston.
Players flocked to the scene, chasing new opportunities and glory. And chasing a different kind of opportunity, investors began to pour in as well.
And this is... So I think this is less of a conversation now, but for some context, a big chunk of the talks between about 2013 to 2016 were within the industry were how much of this should be modeled the way that traditional sports is modeled. If you want my philosophy, I've always thought, okay, as far as advertising goes, that's fine, or the way that certain things are produced and aired, that's fine as well. But they took a lot of the ideas from sports that I think didn't make sense. It's important to realize that although you see sports and esports, obviously they're almost the same word. They're very different things culturally. The fan base is extremely different culturally, and I think. Even going back to MLG, a lot of MLG was like trying to capture the idea of sports. And what happened at Activision Blizzard was Bobby Kotick pulled in a lot of these big actual sports, in this case NFL, we're seeing here the Patriots, pulled them in and tried to get them, and succeeded in getting them to buy into the league. And also follow a city format, which I think they'll talk about more in a second. I'll let the video continue.
Once I think the Kraft Group came on and officially became the backers of the Boston Uprising, then it was kind of like, oh, this is big. And I'm pretty sure that the Kraft Group then kind of like, you know how millionaires are, they all hang out together, I guess. And they were like, oh, I own an esports team, you should own an esports team. And they all got around and started buying and paying for esports teams. And that's when it was kind of like, oh, we have like something really, really big here. And it's
This
bigger.
is, by the way, I should mention, that's Huck back there. StarCraft 2 Huck. Let me go back a second. Let me see if I can catch him on camera here.
Around and started buying and paying for esports.
So we had a
teams,
lot
and
of the
that's when it
people
was
that
kind
were
of like,
figureheads.
oh, we have, like,
there he is on the left here. A lot of people
really,
who are
really big here.
figureheads.
And it's bigger
in
than
the,
I think anybody thought.
in the
This is being
scene that
touted
had moved
as
into
the
this
next
space.
NFL compared to the Premier League of the future.
Bobby Kotick over here on the
What's
right.
your vision for this? Is that for real?
Yeah, that's our vision for how we're going to celebrate and reward our players, is build a league that is like the NFL, only global. And it's going to take some time, but what will make it really easy is having great partners like Robert Kraft.
Keep in mind that a lot of the people that were running esports were the Morheims and kind of the OGs at Blizzard. This was the first time we saw Activision really step in, and that's Bobby Kotick try to come in here, and a lot of these decisions came from Activision. It was a very I think it's easy for people to look at Blizzard as and think of it as a monolith, but there really are a lot of different people at Blizzard, a lot of different groups working on different games, a lot of different ideas, and this was, I think, a moment where it seemed like Activision decided to move in and start doing their own esports thing that was going to be different from StarCraft, from Heroes of the Storm, from Hearthstone, all that.
As far as actually valuing the franchise,
Like, what did it cost you to start the franchise roughly, and what do you think it's worth right now? A short time later.
it's been reported within like the $20 million range for the first teams. That's fairly accurate, but that's not what you would actually pay.
You think you could sell it for a lot more than that now? Though?
Absolutely. Yeah.
For the fans, though, it wasn't just...
Okay, so $20 million. Did he say $20 million buy-in? I want to point out, this is these numbers are insane. These numbers are crazy. And the idea that you can recoup your costs with that is wild. I think that there's been a lot of business decisions that have been bad in esports, but the numbers right away that everybody was hearing, and a lot of people weren't, making this public. It was kind of a weird moment. A lot of people saying, "Okay, am I wrong? Do I not understand this? Is this really, is esports in a place that's much more lucrative and soon to be profitable than we understood, or are we in fact in a bubble? Is there too much hype?" And as we'll see as this video continues on, yeah, we were in a bubble. There was way too much speculation going on. The money wasn't there, whether it was advertising or anything else.
Just about the money. This was the dawn of a new era, an enormous new offering, and the people were here for it.
113 players from 19 countries have been signed, all of them with this single goal, to be crowned the Season 1 champion. The wait is finally over. It's time to kick off the inaugural season of the Overwatch League.
But it looks like the Boston Uprising are too busy trying to take the point. That's the Widow Duel 1. Again, Philadelphia Fusion always going to come out on top. Striker, though, lands a big triple on the barrage there. The Graviton helping. Both supports are caught together. That's what they needed, but Carpe strikes in again. Striking down. Felix also being removed. Carpe, what are you doing? This is unbelievable.
Few kills here going in favor of the Gladiators. Another hack trying to come through from Hydration onto Agility, as we know how devastating the hack is now. As Fisher's like, get him, son!
This is sick, by the way. This play.
This is a bit ballsy. Fisher takes him down. Fisher.
Not many Widowmakers would go for this play.
Now the Pinewood,
and he just absolutely nails it here. Even the machine gun, what a flick! And another one, beautiful.
I think it was initially pitched as like, NFL for esports, and it seemed a little far-fetched, but there was some part of you that wanted to believe that. I still remember the moment of...
By the way, this studio, if this is the studio I'm thinking it is, this is in Burbank, California. For those who aren't familiar that much, like with where TV is made, there's a ton of TV studios in Burbank. I think this was actually the studio that Johnny Carson's old show was in. And then I think they filmed Days of Our Lives in this as well. I worked in this studio, did some StarCraft content there, and it's like in a big, how do I say this? It's like a big block of studios. There's like 16 studios there with like a cafeteria in the middle, and like a lot of different TV shows are being filmed there. It's almost like a factory for making television, and that's what Blizzard had bought there, and we're filming this out of there. So a lot of my friends... and some of them are, we've already seen in this video, we're working out of Burbank in this studio almost daily.
Loading up opening night, I think it was San Francisco versus Valiant or something. 300K viewers on Twitch, and like the show is getting started up, and it's hard to see that number and not be like, dang, this really could be something.
Oh, the inaugural season was just unmatched. The energy that it brought, all the new fans it brought in, because it not only brought new fans to the game, but to competitive esports in general.
Okay, I like this for the Gladiators. This is cute. They're gonna try and circle around. The Spitfire, want to interrupt this a little bit here. Where are you going? Where are you? Oh, the high ground. Yeah. Oh, this is so nasty. Short Force chilling in spawn. I'm gonna call this the merry-go-round because it makes me laugh, makes me happy, and Sean Paul switches to the Widowmaker at just the right time. Closer drops down, and it's a day in the shooting range for Lane Roberts.
But in spite of all the excitement, passionate fans, and avid supporters, there were questions too. Blizzard was promising more than any esports league in history.
Which is one of the biggest problems here. They, in a lot of ways, set themselves up to fail.
A city-based model with home and away games, new stadiums, and more infrastructure than anything that had come before.
By the way, and I was going to bring this up at some point in time in here, but since they mentioned a city-based model, this is a weird model to have in an esport. You know, online gaming and cities don't really go that well together. You know, like they were just mentioned earlier, okay, it's a San Francisco Shock versus the LA Valiant or whatever it's called. You know, how much in gaming do you really associate with cities? I think the only time that you're really going to do that is like, okay, East Coast versus West Coast in fighting games. Maybe who's the best in a certain area of the world in Smash Melee, especially back in the day because there was no online play and a way to connect. Generally speaking, people, if you're going to do kind of regional rivalries, you want to go with nations. And I think this is where Riot Games and what they did with Valorant specifically has been just a lot better and a lot more interesting. And the city model was also weird. Most of the players weren't even from the city or from the country where that city is. So it was a very odd model. And again, the cost of running something like this is crazy. So they already set themselves up to be in a difficult position long-term by trying to go for something like this.
Could they really pull it off?
You know, we think with the Overwatch League and the city-based format, which is...
Chad says it's not on, it's just like the normal sports model. That's it. We'll talk about that more in a second, but that's kind of the problem, is if you don't have the ability to sustain that, your game isn't on that level, then you're just creating more costs and more problems and more promises you can't fulfill.
It's not just unique for esports. You know, a league where Shanghai plays Los Angeles in the regular season has never been done in sports.
This is Nate Nanzer, who I think bailed somewhere in the middle of Overwatch League, probably internally when things started to go pretty poorly. But yeah, this was one of the big things they were trying to sell. And I think part of the reason why this model came to be was because, you know, that's a way that you could make this idea palatable to these big sports orgs that are going to be buying in. It almost has to make sense to them. And this is, you know, one of the issues that I feel like we have. Sometimes it's like still a problem now, but how do you explain to this older, maybe boomer generation that is frankly just out of touch with gaming or with, you know, eSports as a concept and trying to get them connected? And in some ways, I wonder if it's better for esports to kind of build itself out on its own and not be as reliant on this, because you end up with a model that almost doesn't make sense no matter how you cut it.
Either. It's really the first of its kind, and we think it's going to be something really special for a lot of years to come.
Personally, I was a little bit worried because it sounded like a logistical nightmare. They were aiming very high, and being able to reach to the goal that they wanted with everybody just traveling, considering the logistical nightmares, again, as I said earlier, with the venues, with the visas, with preparations and so on, it was a tough dream to achieve.
There's obviously a huge fan base out there that wants to engage with this content live, wants to go and attend events and feel like they're a part of the global community celebrating the best gamers in the world.
Overwatch is a global sport, right? Overwatch is a game that's played all over the world. That's why it was important to us to have a global league. We have a huge audience in the US, but we also have a huge audience in China and Korea and France and Germany and the UK, Brazil, all over the world.
It was just really getting hyped up to a point of like, this has got to be bigger. And I think even though there was conversations after the announcement, when they got kind of quiet, there was conversations of people being like, they have to be having a hard time setting this up logistically and money-wise and selling it to people.
But in the early years, the league blew up. New and returning fans tuned in and fell in love with something genuinely hype.
Is this the secret weapon for the London Spitfire? Is this the answer to their problem? Etsuno's down again. That heralds disaster generally for the Fusion, and Carpe wasn't far behind. Prophet with 3. He's killed 4 players now on his own. And the Spitfire are coming through with this one. Prophet finds 5 kills on this Tracer, and you better believe that's enough.
But Overwatch as a game was struggling more and more with balance and meta issues, and slowly but surely souring the fan base on the league.
So this is a really important thing to talk about. What was really weird about Overwatch was that people were kind of deciding this game, which as an esport was sort of an untested model, would be competitively viable, spectatable, palatable. And as I say that, let's take some examples here. What are some models that have already worked? Let's take MOBAs, right? Dota, which was a game made inside of Warcraft 3, Riot Games very effectively, I don't want to say copied, but they basically exported that game type, which was already clearly competitive and viable, had a huge player base, and was starting to get a lot of people interested in, you know, watching it and learning about it, and put that into League of Legends. Valve just made Dota 2, pulled the rug right out from under Blizzard, and put that out there. Let's take Hearthstone. Magic the Gathering was already huge. There was already something similar to that there. Now, when it comes to shooting games, we have what we would call tactical shooters. So that's Counter-Strike. There's actually several other games like that. Although if you're watching this, you're probably American or European. And you might not be familiar with it, but games like Crossfire, which are massive in China and Brazil and were bigger in Korea. There's a lot of games that follow those models. That's basically like the one side plants the bomb, the other one stops it or diffuses it. And now you have that with Valorant. Fighting games, another really easy example of a lot of games that people really liked and will come back to. And you know, I think we really have a good formula for that. StarCraft 2, that was obviously based off of StarCraft 1, which was in Korea proven to be a spectator sport, and with StarCraft 2 helped blow the esports scene up as a whole. Now with Overwatch League, this was like a lot of ideas borrowed maybe from Team Fortress Classic, which did have a big player base, not the kind of competitive scene that you would compare to the games that I talked to before. So they kind of just decided that this was going to be a thing before it was a thing, which is kind of crazy, especially when you put this much money behind it.
And a particularly notorious offender was GOATs.
As we saw sort of season 2 come around and, players starting to really orbit around a very safe way to play, we had the GOATs meta spawn, which was a composition that featured no DPS players.
I think we're just going to focus on basics, just play GOATs. And
this is just still the standoff between both of these teams, but London with that sound barrier looking to end this fight.
Shatter. Such sustain. There's no one is dying anywhere on this. Birdwing's got another grab, the second into the fight. Gonna catch several again. Follow-up still not quite there. Transcendence able to keep him alive. And now finally someone dies and it happens to be Prophet. And that's GOATs in a nutshell.
From the viewing perspective, it was certainly boring to see the same heroes on every map in every match, right? I do feel like that's something that could have been dealt with a lot sooner than it was. We needed a patch and it didn't come for whatever reason.
We do see the
and this is one of the dilemmas of when you have a game where it's like, well, how many different heroes or characters are they going to pick? Is there are they going to find one thing that's best? And if you're making people compete for money, they're going to just go with what works, what makes sense. And so, this is one of these problems where it's like, yeah, well, we haven't really tested this model of game before. And there's a redundancy dilemma if people end up kind of, quote unquote, solving it, and then what was supposed to be the saleable point of the game, like, okay, there's all these different heroes and all these different possibilities, instead turns into, the same matchup over and over.
Outlaws are going to pull out Dante's Tracer. This has been some of the things that Outlaws fans have been waiting for, is a good Tracer player on Houston. It's Jake on the far. This combo's worked well for them before, but as soon as they see the defensive setup, they will just simply swap it away. Crucial time lost here for the Outlaws.
People booing.
Just letting the fans give their the fans here in the studio give their opinion.
Well,
You want your team to win, right? They're going to have to play what's meta.
Chat, I cannot imagine what it's like to be a pro player right now. Chat, I want you to think of this, okay? People and pro players scrim this meta probably 6 to 8 hours a day.
And I think that after...
So, I mean, just think about that. You as a company have decided that the game that you didn't test is the game that everybody wants to watch, is the game that's the most interesting, and suddenly you're confronted with the reality of... you know, well, maybe the way that this game is designed or played, that is going to be a bigger problem than it already is, or than you would even imagine it could be, excuse me.
While we realized that was maybe not really conducive to exciting gameplay, or at least a varied, you know, array of different gameplay styles. So there's definitely a dark patch in Season 2 where DPS were not necessary.
GOATS wasn't the only thing the community found repetitive, though. As the Overwatch League became more and more commercialized, some players and teams began to feel redundant. That personal touch, the magic that drew in so many people at the start, was beginning to fade.
So I think over time, the league lost a lot of its personality. Like, it just started to feel very bland, and you know, like there were so many teams as well. There was like 20 teams, and it was just like, do I care about team 18 playing team 17? No, not really. And even again, like I said, there wasn't much to distinguish that match from any other match.
More and more people began to feel that the fan experience just wasn't the same, and negative sentiments began to spread throughout the league. Some people started to question the future of the whole enterprise.
By the way, that point, this is, I think, a kind of a new problem in esports, is like, okay, how much do you want out there all the time? How much is too much? Because there's a point where, as a fan, okay, like, how much am I expected to keep up on this? Versus, is this something I can pop into and feel like I'm part of it, or do I need to be watching every day? I think Riot also does a bad job with this, where they have their game on so much all the time, and maybe that's to pull in advertiser money. I don't know, but there's a point where it's almost like you feel excluded because it's become so consistently out there that it's hard to follow. I don't know if that's right or wrong, you know, but I think there is a right amount to have the game out there. One of the things that was nice about GSL when it slowed down, by the way, was that, you know, people could keep up. You could have a job and still tune into the VODs in the evening or whenever you were able to do so, and not feel like you were being left behind, or it just wasn't a thing you had to be plugged into all the time. So just putting that out there.
I've seen people say, well, GOATS is dead, and now it's just double sniper, and that's going to be terrible. Or, oh, now everybody's just going to play McCree. And at a certain point, I'm like, what the hell do you people want?
So, in other words, you don't want them to eat all the ults in the game like D.Va?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There are these moments of regret that you have as a game developer. And perhaps eating everybody's ult is one of those.
But there was a big change on the horizon for the Overwatch League, just not one that any of the fans wanted. The decision to take the league's broadcasts from Twitch to YouTube was instantly controversial.
This was bad, and from what I understand, GSL was packaged in this. So this is, remember when we were just taken off Twitch? We used to have like over 10K people watching on Twitch all the time. We got moved onto YouTube, I think, with everything Blizzard related. We were some kind of like a side dish with the big Overwatch plate. But yeah, I mean, and this, by the way, part of the reason why I think they did this was probably because YouTube paid them enough. And yeah, trying to get that money grab, because again, you've made a system that is so expensive and will never bring the money back in that you're just trying to do anything to keep it sustainable. And YouTube, at the time especially, and it's still kind of true now, it's not the place for live streaming esports events. You need to be on Twitch.
Especially after reports that they left a $90 million deal behind.
The Twitch deal collapses, and then what Blizzard do is a deal with YouTube to put everything exclusively on YouTube, which caused a ton of problems. Because really, you want your esport on Twitch, if I'm totally honest.
I was not able to speak publicly about OWL while I worked at Twitch for obvious reasons. But you better believe that I was the guy in every f***ing meeting going, this is stupid and you're all stupid. It did not feel good. I'll tell you why it didn't feel good. Because that league cost a lot of f***ing money, and a year later, 11 of my f***ing staff was laid off.
That is DJ Wheat. He's the guy that got me my first job at WCG. I casted in New York, and then I was hired by him and his team. So I owe him a lot. He's 100% right. I got to connect with him when I was in San Francisco years and years back. But I think one of the smartest guys in the whole industry. One of the OGs at Twitch. I just think he's a legend. So I got a lot of respect for him. But him, along with a lot of people at Twitch, were very concerned about Overwatch League. People that worked in esports were kind of concerned that this was going to go so poorly that it was going to set the entire industry back, which I think it has. Whoops. Unpause.
Overwatch
Sorry.
had the highest average minute audience of any channel on Twitch. What we've learned is a couple of things. One is you need to go for the biggest audience, right?
Yeah.
And if we were to do a do-over, I would say, let's not go to YouTube or go exclusive just yet.
Dude, there's also a big change that the Overwatch League is just gonna die completely. Like that's a big change.
Guys, we've been watching the coronavirus for weeks now, continuing to see the market action trade around the updates we get, but the coronavirus is also hitting esports, as popular gaming leagues like Activision Blizzard's Overwatch League and Tencent Holdings' Riot Games.
Because it seems the coronavirus has spread to South Korea and more countries as well.
Yeah, that was weird. South Korea was the second nation hit by COVID. That was so crazy. Obviously, we were all impacted by COVID, but I remember, immediately you're like, oh, I can't be flying in and out of the country now. We're in total lockdown. And, for me at that time, along with for a lot of, in fact, I made about half my money doing studio work, the other half working overseas. A lot of people, they just made money, working these big events that take maybe 2 to 4 days. So this was a massive blow to everybody in esports.
Dynasty homestands will be canceled. And when they got word of the virus spreading, they had to speed run packing all of their stuff in order to make a last-minute flight back. This is scary stuff, man.
COVID struck at the worst possible time for Overwatch League. We were just moving into what was the long-term dream of the Overwatch League, was to have homestands, to really make this city-based model work.
There's more to come after the break. What's that? I think, yep, it's the Envoy Excel take on the London Spitfire.
If that had been able to happen, that would have been magical for the Overwatch League, and it could have been an incredibly different future from what we're seeing now, because that was the grand vision.
There were a lot of changes with the matches moving online. What was the biggest takeaway for you guys in terms of adjusting to these new situations?
Obviously being in our own rooms, we're on TeamSpeak together, so it's not really as humane-like, I would say.
Despite some arguments that COVID actually extended the OWL's lifespan, ultimately it put the biggest, most interesting thing about the league on the back burner indefinitely. And that was devastating. Eventually.
Yeah, now, I don't agree with this part of the video. By the way, I think they overall did a very good job. COVID was very good for online viewership, for like everything. I mean, part of, we just have the Twitch layoffs. Part of that was that like everybody was making, there was any kind of streaming space was making so much more money and growing so much more quickly during COVID. Even my stream numbers were better during COVID. People were just at home. And so something was on. If I understand right at the time, things were going so bad at Overwatch League, one of the big plans was to basically have the whole circuit or most of it in China. Somebody can fact check me on that, or somebody who's actually worked there. Someone's going to see this who worked there. Now, obviously, China was completely sealed up, so that was out of the question. But part of the reason for going even to China was that they would be more likely to pay and cover the costs. And frankly, things were going very poorly. So I kind of call BS on this part, like, oh, COVID was hard for everybody. Yeah, it was. But that should not have hurt the numbers. If anything, that would have been like a saving grace, not just for viewership, but for cost. Now you don't have to have all these crazy, the cost of moving teams, the cost of housing or lodging teams, I should say, in different cities all over the world, getting visas for people. Yeah, I mean, just all that. So, it's obviously COVID sucked and it was sad and a lot of people passed and a lot of businesses were destroyed. But I don't know if online viewership was a casualty of that.
Eventually, the pandemic began to ease off. Maybe that could have been a chance to see the league return to its original plans, but instead, Activision Blizzard had to deal with another sort of illness, the kind that rots companies from the inside.
A frat boy culture. That is how Activision Blizzard is now being described here in this new lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
The agency alleges that male employees play video games during the workday while delegating responsibilities to female employees, engage in sexual banter, and joke openly about rape, among other things. So they're making the girls do all of the work while they talk about rape and harassing them.
I saw a lot of people just want to boycott the league when that news started coming out, all of the internal Blizzard struggles. It really just did more damage, and the sponsorship end as well.
I'm just going to pause this real quick here, just because I see this in the chat. It's not about online viewership. The 2020 business model was counting on ticket sales from homestands. Correct, but you're also not spending money on having to book the arenas and staff it and all that. So there is, you're right. They were going to make money off that, but it is literally just cheaper in every metric to have something online. You know, so just that counterpoint there. Sorry.
We had all these different sponsors, and now poof, it's all gone.
The danger here is YouTube go, you know what? We don't want to be associated with you because T-Mobile don't want to be associated with you. Coke don't want to be associated with you.
Brands like that were not putting money in anymore. And of course, that's going to hurt, you know, the bottom line. If you've got teams all around the world and you're spending money to bring DJ Khaled to perform at your finals and sponsors are pulling out because of the news that's breaking that your company might have been like an absolutely horrific workplace for women to be in, I don't understand how you could then keep an expensive esports league up while that's going on.
For a long time, I think they've just been a horrible company. They have not been that golden age Blizzard people like to pretend that they still are. It is a company that is so far out of touch and so corrupt that it's gross.
It was a bummer. It was a bummer to see, you know, that happen to League because, you know, as far as I'm aware, you know, that part of the whole machinery at Blizzard Activision didn't really deserve that hit, you know? So they certainly felt the effects, right? The sponsors leaving through, you know, no fault of their own. So I think they sort of ended up being kind of like secondary victims to the whole situation, right? Where, you know, they were also very negatively affected by all this happening.
And what's even perhaps more sad to acknowledge is that a lot of devs that you might find to be heroes, I find to be heroes of mine, may have known about this all along and maybe even participated in it. It's horrible. And
Even as public outrage over the harassment suit and internal demons threatened to tear Blizzard apart, players were getting fed up with the lack of meaningful changes. Worse yet, Blizzard seemed to be focusing on Overwatch 2 instead of looking for ways to improve the original.
Real quick here, because I see some of you guys saying this in the chat. Lots of those costs had already been paid for in 2020, and that they had already paid for the venues. Okay, I don't see that mentioned here. That would be interesting. I believe you can get that insured if you have to cancel concerts, comedy shows, esports events. If something happens, I believe that can be insured and covered. So I would be curious the details on that, but the reality is, as far as I understand where they're at now, there are not really esports events that are making a whole lot of profit off of the live event thing. Maybe in parts of CS:GO, but yeah, just to put that out there. And by the way, sponsors pulling out here, that will kill it. If you lose sponsorships, and here they're talking about the Me Too movement and how that affected Blizzard. Obviously sponsors are going to pull out. I heard a lot of sponsors were already unhappy and ready to pull out, so I think it was, in a way, a kind of convenient time for them to back away from this failing league.
Game. They were moving over to the Diva, just going to be duplicating that up, but Jackson now finally unleashing that support ultimate he was saving. It's more than enough to try and clear them away, and Violet falling means there's going to be a lack of heals. That self-destruct as well.
Maybe this is going to be a hot take. I think this shit is the worst thing to happen to Overwatch. This shit is f***ed up. It is not fun. It is not skill. It is fucking bullshit. It is dog shit. This is so bad. I don't know, because people are saying,
Overwatch Artosis here.
Big release, or what about fucking goats, or no, this is so bad.
There was no lights in that tunnel. Like that tunnel was pitch black. We were doing more than fumble in the dark. We were running into walls. Like it was just double shield. There was no hope. There was no communication. Zero, nothing at all.
And once again, Blizzard seemed fixated on the wrong problems.
Overwatch has always been played with 2 teams of 6 players. Overwatch 2 will be played with 2 teams of 5 players.
Holy shit!
I think it's going to suck in the long term for off-tank players, because inevitably it will mean that we're probably going to see some tank players getting shafted and going to be losing their jobs in some capacity.
I would say it looks better than it did before, but there's a long fucking way to go.
So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, you have a game model you haven't really tested, and now you're going to be changing that in game. I don't know if some of this was influenced by the general success of 5v5 shooters. But yeah, anyways.
There's no way that this is the work that had been done in like 2 years. There's just no way.
A lot of people were just kind of frustrated in losing out on what we had in Overwatch 1. One of the biggest draws that they had for the game was the fact that it was a 6v6 arena shooter, not a 5v5 like every other game out there is kind of been. So I think there's a lot of disgruntled people losing out on things like that, not wanting some of their favorite characters to be reworked because you might have to learn a completely different play style depending on what hero you like to play.
You're literally cutting an entire role. It's like baseball being like, now we don't have a shortstop. All of a sudden they cut a role out.
Yeah, I kind of call BS on this. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people were upset. I mean, you have people that are going to stick with a game. The people who actually really like it and enjoy it, and then you're changing that, so that's going to have some impact. But I think that's not as consequential to, the fall of the game itself.
And teams have to adjust.
There is a community that wants a lot of Overwatch 1 back, and they think a lot of the magic was lost in 5v5. Whether or not that can be fixed with tanks being updated or supports being nerfed, we'll see. We'll see through the next year. Like if it doesn't get better the next year, like I think more and more people will start to realize like maybe we did have it better.
And even when Overwatch 2 did come out, the promised and highly anticipated PvE mode never materialized at all. The player base started to spike.
This is insane, by the way. So my theory on this is that they had to tell like shareholders that there was going to be a sequel for their big game. And so they kind of announced it. Like, I remember seeing Overwatch 2 announced, and I thought, that is so weird because they don't make the sequel for any game at Blizzard that quickly. StarCraft 2, it took like 10 years. And it's obviously going to take even longer if there's ever a StarCraft 3. Diablo, I mean, think of how far apart this was spaced out. And when you think of a sequel from Blizzard, you're really thinking of like, obviously a completely new game. You're thinking of that just for anything, right? What's weird is this was sold as a sequel, and it literally wasn't. It might as well have been DLC. Look, a lot of games that are basically like these living games where, they have servers and constant updates, sometimes even weekly. I mean, you have more changes and improvements in games like that where they don't even make major announcements. They're just patching it and fixing things than you would have with Overwatch 2. I mean, this was a really damning moment. This, I think, Warcraft Reforged and in the disaster that was when Blizzard crapped that out, probably the two worst things that Blizzard's ever done. This was wild. No PvE, nothing compared to what was promised.
Viral.
With everything we've learned about what it takes to operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on that original vision for PvE that was shown in 2019.
There was no...
Look at that swallow, by the way. I'm nervous for him as he says it. Hold on. Imagine being the guy that brought this news.
To operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on that original vision for PvE that was shown in 2019.
There was no need for Overwatch 2. It was a cash grab marketing scam that made them abandon the first game for years and just try to cash grab reskins, an upgraded shop. Anybody who tries to tell you that this has not been the biggest manipulation and scam in multiplayer gaming history is lying through their teeth.
Crisis after crisis had eroded the foundation of the Overwatch League. A lethal combination of unrealized potential, unfulfilled promises, and unrelenting monetary issues threatened to snuff out what was supposed to be the most important thing esports has ever done. As reports of mass layoffs on the esports side began to surface, it was time to admit that the death of the Overwatch League was no longer an if, but rather a when.
More so than anything else, the legacy of the league is going to be, as sad as it may be, a legacy of failure of doing, as an American say it, biting off more than you can chew. really.
Exactly.
Maybe going a little bit too big without really having the framework, the infrastructure, the management. I mean, I've heard so many horror stories about Overwatch League management, you know, whether it's the orgs or the teams. And I think that, like, obviously it's a bit of a caution that, you know, you need to make sure that you have the foundation, the fan support, the teams, the leadership that you need to be able to run something this big.
It doesn't help that the league was only in place for 2 years before a global pandemic happened. Like, it doesn't help that in the midst of that, they were behind the scenes working on a not sequel, then sequel, everything changed kind of thing. You know, it is kind of like a perfect storm of shit that would kill an esports league.
Now, it didn't seem as if Blizzard was ready to announce its plans for Overwatch esports at or around the 2023 Toronto finals. But the writing was on the wall. This was going to be the league's last hurrah.
It's probably better for the health of Overwatch esports and probably better for the health of the players that it's dying, just because the format in its own, it's just not self-sustainable. It was inevitable at some point, so rather than later.
I think it's probably a lesson for people in terms of the ambition behind like what esports is. I think that like people presumably expected Overwatch League to become like a multi-million like sports rival. I think it just can't hit the heights that maybe we expected for it, and I think probably when you start to put in buy-ins of like 20-30 million, the return on investment was going to be difficult.
Overwatch League has been a very ambitious project from day one, and a decent part of that ambition has been fulfilled. A lot of that has been left on the table, and you know, in an alternate timeline, we can only imagine what that would have looked like.
I think Overwatch League will go down as it could have been amazing, ended up being underwhelming. Because, you know, the idea was great that there should be a proper league for esports and a proper managed ecosystem for pro players where they feel job security, where they feel safety, where they can kind of grow without fear of, well, if we don't win this tournament, we're out of a job.
I think, unfortunately, that people are going to look at the Overwatch League as an example of what not to do. And it's hard not to look at it that way from how the league has went.
I had such high expectations and high hopes for this when I started. I mean, I moved halfway across the world for it. I completely changed my career for Overwatch. You know, I really believed in it. Given everything that's happened with the league, you know, teams are already pulling out, right? You know, I mean, it's probably better if Overwatch League goes away after this finals. And I want to be clear that that's not saying Overwatch esports should go away. I think Overwatch esports can go through kind of a resurrection almost, right? Where it's like, now we're going to be able to start building things again in sort of a more grassroots, genuine esports way.
The Overwatch League gave
right.
orgs the option to vote on whether or not they wanted to continue playing in the current system or cut their losses, take a payout, and withdraw. They all chose the latter, nailing shut the Overwatch League's coffin for good.
They are all amazing individuals and really did deserve better. Unfortunately, though, the powers that be that were much stronger than them, and I think Overwatch could have been amazing in that department, but they really fumbled the bag. And they didn't fumble it once. They fumbled it, and then they fumbled it again. It's insane how many bad decisions Overwatch League made over the years.
The biggest swing taken in the history of esports turned out to be a failure. Overwatch esports will, of course, persevere, but the gargantuan, ambitious Overwatch League that was supposed to change esports as we know it is no more.
With this game and with its esports, you just see massive potential, but then you just see failure to deliver. And it's always from upper management positions, and it's always dropping people who are on the ground actually doing the good work. But there was definitely interest, and this is what makes it sad, I think, with Overwatch League.
The community remains as passionate as it's ever been. The fans that stuck with Overwatch through thick and thin are still here, cheering for what's coming next.
The hype that it was generating at the start, the overall interest was so crazy, and I think with this being such a unique model, there was so much potential for it to really thrive. Obviously, in the end, it was too overly ambitious, and people are going to look back at that. We knew what this league could have been. We saw it in the first season, even the second for a little bit. It could have been something amazing, and like there were a lot of special moments. It really could have blown the esports scene away and be something legendary that people would remember forever. Despite the disappointment I might feel in some aspects, it's always good to remember that it delivered some special memories and that a lot of these players aren't to blame for any of this. They worked their hearts off for this, and it was amazing, honestly. Even as it goes away, I think we can all kind of cherish these memories. I think it's an esport that kind of captured some special things that no other esport would be able to do.
Yeah, it's emotional to follow. I think they did a great job with that video. Yeah, look, I think a lot of, I mean, it's sad, but I think a lot of the damage is real there, at least for the next couple of years here. I think a lot of investors are going to be scared away because of what happened with Overwatch League. And a lot of people early on kind of saw this coming. Thought, okay, this is weird. These numbers don't add up. The game hasn't, you know, it's not a game that's been tested before. We've actually had esports for, I mean, now about 25 years. And there are plenty of models that were safer to use than this one. So yeah, again, Overwatch League not going to, sorry, Overwatch esports not going to go away forever. I think it might come back in a different form, and hopefully a more sustainable one. So thank you so much for joining me for this. I hope you enjoyed my added commentary to that video. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. If there's something I missed, or you're, you know, a fan of Overwatch and you feel like there's some part either this video didn't cover or I didn't cover, I'd be very interested to hear that. So please let me know. Have a good day. Also go to tastelessthreads.com. You can check out my merch there. And I hope to see you in a future video. Bye-bye.